Okay, here's the moment of truth. Hello, Think Twice Radio. It seems like a pretty clean restart. So, hope you enjoyed the commercial break. We were our sponsors, and the heavy web traffic lagged us down, but we're back. So, thank you for your patience, and welcome to an episode of Austin Audits. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about an exciting development because tomorrow the Eastside Parkways Coalition has an item in the Buffalo Common Council regarding concerns with the State Department of Transportation's Kensington Expressway project. So that'll be the first item of business. Then also, I'm going to do a deep dive audit into a proposed new police shooting facility on the east side by the Central Terminal, because I have some concerns with that. And then also going to be looking into communication between NISTOT and the city's Department of Public Works, and some concerns I have that potentially the city of Buffalo improperly expedited construction of the Kensington. Then we'll be going through tomorrow's Common Council agenda. So tomorrow is a Tuesday committee meeting, so we'll have a civil service, finance, community development, and legislation meeting. So we're going to go through the agenda and just highlight some items of interest. I know one item that I just saw today on the agenda was a civil service item that I think might be related to some of my grievances and termination items that I followed. So very excited to see that there might actually be some movement on the council to address some of the systemic corruption or corrosion within the Human Resources and Civil Service Department. Then if we have some time at the end, I might do a segment on the blues and the 12-bar blues pattern, which makes itself known and is really the foundation of American blues music. So that'll be today's show, and let's get started. So the first item that I wanted to cover is the Eastside Parkways Coalition. So the Eastside Parkways Coalition has they're on tomorrow's agenda. So that's kind of the big news tomorrow, because it's a big deal. So the Eastside Parkways item 25-510 was sent to the Common Council Community Development Committee agenda. So tomorrow is Tuesday, March 25th. So at 2 p.m. at City Hall on the 13th floor. Item 25-510 is on the Common Council agenda, and essentially item 25-10 is just concerned with the Kensington Expressway. So Eastside Parkways is saying, wear your ESP shirts. If you don't have one, you can buy one, and if you don't have one and you don't want to buy one, we're asking that you wear emerald greens. That's kind of the color of the Eastside Parkways. So we're trying to fill the chambers with greens. So green shirts, if you have green, wear it. And we'll be meeting at 1:30 in Niagara Square, and then making our way into council chambers at 2 p.m. So this is a big deal. So I wanted to look at the actual item. So on the agenda is this item 25-510, which is called C. Moppins Concerns Kensington Expressway Project. And C. Moppins, that's Candace Moppins, who is the executive director of the Eastside Parkways Coalition. And one thing the council does is they name your items for you. So I kind of wish they hadn't, said concerns, because I know, for example, one time, you don't have control over the name of the items. But essentially this is, expressing concerns with the Kensington Expressway project. So item 25-510, which is on tomorrow's agenda. And really, this is a big deal because, I think right now, for the duration of the state's Kensington Expressway project, the position of the city of Buffalo officials and the official policy of the city of Buffalo is that the Kensington Expressway is not a city issue. They've said that both formally and informally, and essentially their position is it's not a city issue because it's a NISTOT issue. So they're saying because the New York State Department of Transportation is the lead agency, that this is not a city of Buffalo issue, which is kind of right. I think it fails the common sense test, especially in New York State where we have home rule. So actually, the way New York State's set up is that actual municipalities have power and jurisdiction ultimately over at the base level. So especially with the project being locating in the Kensington. I think we all kind of know that's just politicians not wanting to take a stand. But I think it's just this is another example of the tide slowly turning into, the public's, it's momentum on this movement, which it does feel like a movement, this kind of broad-based groundswell of support for fully restoring Humboldt Parkway. Because, back in the 50s and 60s, the nice dot, they tore down Humboldt Parkway, which was the emerald necklace that connected Delaware Park to MLK Park, and was really the crown jewel of Frederick Law Olmsted's design of the city of Buffalo's park system. And the city of Buffalo, we were so fortunate to have had this world-class park system. Really, that's not even over-exaggerating. I think Frederick Law Olmsted, who's the famous architect that designed Central Park in New York City, he said that the city of Buffalo is the best planned city in the world. So that was kind of ruined when in the 50s and 60s, based on the kind of philosophy of the day of, prioritizing cars and American progress and kind of the suburban lifestyle. The easiest way to get people downtown was to build a highway into downtown from the suburbs, and the easiest route to do that was by this parkway, which was essentially just trees. So all they had to do was cut down trees, and this is just feels like right. There's always been this coalition of city residents ever since the highway was built. There's been city residents that have been opposing the idea of an expressway, and even when it was constructed, people were protesting, saying this was a terrible idea to tear down the parkway. And just with the moment in time we are now, this is a big deal to be on the council agendas tomorrow. When the city's official position has been that this isn't a city issue, this is a big deal because tomorrow will really be the first time that this issue has been heard in council chambers, despite a few years now of actual protests and organizing of trying to get city officials to take a stand. So tomorrow's community development meeting, this is how I suspect it will go, is that the East Side Parkways will have a brief time, I would hope and assume, to just speak on the item. So I'm not expecting some sort of grand profile and courage where a council member is going to really make a stand on the floor for restoring Humboldt. But this is definitely a small victory to have a platform to be considered and to be heard in the council chambers is a big deal, and it's really just another piece of evidence that the tide's slowly changing, and really the residents and the constituents and citizens of the Buffalo having their voice heard. So tomorrow there's going to be a few speakers that are going to speak, and I encourage you, if you're able to turn out, either visit the council chambers during the meeting. If you can't, watch live on their Facebook page, and even if you don't, they're also calling for to call your council members. So that's one thing that would be huge and make a difference, is actually call City Hall, call the City of Buffalo Common Council, and just let them know that you support full restoration of Humboldt Parkway. Because I really think this is the most important city issue, especially when you consider kind of a long-term view. This is really a once-in-a-generation opportunity to rethink our infrastructure and to regain what was truly stolen from City of Buffalo residents, which was the destruction of a world-class park system. And this is really the time to seize the moment, because if the proposed NICE proposal of putting a 3/4 mile cap on the expressway, keeping the expressway there, and just covering 3/4 of a mile of it, is really just putting a Band-Aid on a scar. And what this scar needs is not a Band-Aid, not a patch. It really needs surgery. It needs to be fully removed and filled in. And I know I've done some commentary in the past, but I really think that the Kensington Expressway is the city of Buffalo's Berlin Wall. It's divided the city of Buffalo east and west, white and black, rich and poor, but it's also divided the city more broadly regionally. It's created a divide within the city and between the suburbs, and it's allowed suburban commuters to kind of get in and out of downtown without ever having to kind of interact or to integrate fully with the city. So I really think this is like our Berlin Wall moment, and I think really removing the Kensington Expressway would be such a massive step forward and progress to building Buffalo into what its potential is, which has the potential to be a world class city. So having a parkway would connect the city both east and west, and it would just be a really monumental thing, and really helping to fix some of the problems that it created. And I think whatever side you are in this issue, I think all parties agree that the Kensington Expressway and it being built was a mistake. It never should have been built where it was. It was obviously a different era then, when really the policies prioritized cars and the commuting class, and really just the whole idea of America. The idea of a highway was thought of as progress. And here we are a couple generations later, and I think we really fully understand the ramifications and really the long-term effects that this highway has had. I mean, one issue that I think is coming to light is that just how damaging it's been for to the health of the community, both human health but also economic health. So I think some of the residents, and all the data shows that residents that live near the Kensington Expressway, those neighborhoods experience some of the worst health outcomes in all the country. I think it's the 95th to 99th percentile in areas like asthma, heart disease, cancer, length of life. And obviously it's a complex issue. It's not just the highway, but the highway definitely doesn't help, especially just the historic legacy of traffic-related air pollutants and particulate matter, and that going into the air, and it's really caused damage on people's health. And then also when you think of it economically, right, we've had this, right, there's many things that contributed to kind of the downfall of the east side of Buffalo. I mean, one was just the policies of redlining, where you had policies where banks, drew red lines on maps and gave loans to certain areas, to certain demographics, and other demographics and areas didn't. But also, just creating a highway, right? Having a highway right in the neighborhood makes that an undesirable place to live for all human beings. No human would willingly choose, if they could, live anywhere. No one would want to live right next to a highway. So it just makes it much harder for people to live and for businesses to thrive. Because if people don't want to live there, it just doesn't make it a good place for businesses to locate. And right, it's just allowed the whole economy's wealth to kind of go from the central city to kind of be more dispersed in the suburbs. So it's kind of subsidized the suburban lifestyle. Where really, when you look at places like Amherst, Hamburg, right, Lancaster, East Aurora, some of these places on the periphery where, right, you go down Transit Road, you go down Niagara Falls Boulevard, they have thriving commercial districts and commercial streets, and that's all supported by a base of consumers and residents that live in the suburbs. And a lot of that economic activity would have been located in the city, and especially the city's radial streets have really struggled. So I think, it would be a really good opportunity to revitalize the city, which is moving towards a less car-centric society. So I encourage you, if you have time, or if not, to at least pay attention tomorrow during the council chambers. And wear your green shirt, and let's show out and turn out, because we really need the council chambers packed with green shirts. So tomorrow, or Tuesday 25th at 2 p.m. in the City of Buffalo Common Council chambers will be the community development meeting, and we encourage everyone to turn out. So that's just one item. Now I wanted to kind of turn to concerns I have with an actual correspondent. So this is related to the Kensington, but I think it's had me thinking. Right, the city of Buffalo's official position is that the Kensington is not a city issue, which obviously kind of fails the common sense test. That obviously this is a city issue. So this is from the Kensington Expressway. There's lots and lots of actual technical documents on the project, but this is Appendix D8, which is, oopsie, so this is actual correspondence with the city of Buffalo. So this is an actual letter and communication between NISTOT and the city of Buffalo, because it's obviously, as the city's official position has been that the Kensington Expressway is not a city issue, and as someone that I'm a little biased, and I personally think that the Kensington is a city issue. Not only is it a city issue, it's the most important city issue of our generation. So it's been making me think of ways of, well, actually, how is this a city issue? So I think one example of how it is a city issue is just this correspondence with the city of Buffalo. So this is Appendix D8, Section 6F and Section 4F, correspondence with the city of Buffalo. So this is an actual communication. So essentially, I think it's just, let's kind of briefly go through here, but there's just communications between the Parks Department and between DPW. So here's kind of a communication between these two different entities. So I think here, I think this is a probably good place to start. So this is Ranjit James, who's the Assistant Regional Design Engineer from NISTOT Region 5. So he essentially, in this letter, he's writing for some parks-related information to the city of Buffalo, because essentially they say here that a total of 7 parks and recreational resources have been identified as in the vicinity of the project. So he's asking just for the city to provide some documents. So he says, they request any available survey or official boundary mapping that the Parks and Recreation Division has for the following resources closest to the project corridor. So MLK Park, Linden Park, the Norway Park Median, Skagit Trail. But I think this is the most important sentence in here. So he says here, as you know, this project is progressing quickly. So I think just that says it all. This kind of, why is that a big deal? Because I think right now that we're post-lawsuit, one of the things that is pretty apparent from the lawsuit is that the state of New York rushed the environmental review, and they kind of expedited the review to kind of expedite this progress. And I think this kind of quote right here, this, as you know, the project is progressing quickly. Just that sentence doesn't need to be in there, but you can kind of see this Ranjit James, the design engineer, he's almost alluding to the fact that, you know, they want a response quickly because the project's moving quickly. I think it just kind of illustrates just the general, I don't know if it isn't the mens rea in legal terms, but just illustrates the general state of mind of NISTOT at the time, that they are progressing quickly through this. And I think, right, this is a $1.5 billion infrastructure project, one of the biggest construction projects, and it did not get a basic environmental impact statement, which one of the great lines from the judge's ruling of the EIS lawsuit is that to build a Tim Hortons in Western New York, you need an EIS. So how NISTOT thought they could get away, or why they decided to not do one for this, is yet to be explained. So I think this one is maybe the most important sentence in the whole document, but I think it just illustrates the NISTOT state of mind that they are moving quickly, expediting this project and kind of cutting corners, which here we are post lawsuit, but I think because they cut corners, they've kind of dug themselves a hole. So that's that letter, but essentially, so here it looks like the map that they provided, where they have the actual NISTOT's project area with some of the parks in here. So essentially, here's a letter from the actual from NISTOT, but essentially, and here we're going to get pretty into the weeds of the technicality, but this is a letter from NISTOT to DPW, where they are essentially asking, so let's go ahead and read this. So essentially, they're talking about Section 4F, which is the use of parkland. So it says here, this is a letter to Nathan Martin, who is the city's Department of Public Works Commissioner. So this says the Federal Highway Administration and New York State Department are progressing on the Kensington Expressway, or the project. So because it's receiving FHA, it's subject to requirements of Section 4F of the U.S. Department of Transportation Act 1966. So it says that Section 4F prohibits the Secretary of Transportation from approving any program or project that requires the use of Section 4F resources. So essentially this 4F. So what is this 4F, right? What is this 4F? Because that's something I wasn't sure. So I went and looked in. Essentially what they're referencing here is this law. And this is, some sort of transportation law. But essentially what they're referencing here is this D section. So it says, temporary occupancies of land that are so minimal as to not constitute a use within the meaning of Section 4F. The following conditions must be satisfied. So essentially because Martin Luther King is a historic park, and this project was needing access to it, they needed permission from DPW to get that access. So essentially, that's the law they're referencing. But I think here's this letter from Nathan Martin, who is the DPW commissioner, and it says essentially, NISTOT's asking DPW for to waive that requirement, and then the DPW commissioner just kind of responds, and I think we can read here his letter. But pursuant to facts and interpretation set forth on the August 23rd letter, he's determining that the temporary occupancy of Martin Luther King Park for construction of the project meets the conditions under 23 CFR Part 774-13D. So he's essentially ruling that that they can go ahead and use the parkway. And essentially, one thing that I'm curious here is that if it actually does meet the requirement. So NISTOT, they were asking for essentially temporary easements totaling just over half an acre. That's required for the installation of temporary support of excavation tiebacks, which are metal cables underground in rock having no surface impact on parking function. That's where I'm confused at this point is what's temporary construction, temporary support of excavation tiebacks? Is that invasive? Is that non-invasive? I don't know. And I think just with there's some drawings here. But essentially, the NISTOT is asking for these. Here's some maps, but essentially just access to build excavation tiebacks, which essentially, from my understanding, is since they're digging deeper into the ground, there's these like tiebacks that you need to do from actually having the soil like just come in, because if they're removing the walls, they need to make sure that it stays in place while they remove the walls. And that's where I don't know. That's where I have questions, and I think sometimes in auditing you run into dead ends. I don't know if it's a dead end, but it's just I don't know what an excavation tieback is, and if it is. Perhaps DPW followed procedures and it was okay, but I think just given obviously that one sentence that it's moving quickly. So given just the culture of moving quickly, I'm curious. I'm curious if this authorization by DPW was proper or not. Especially when you look at this law. So it says, while it might be temporary, it says scope of the work must be minor, which I'm curious. Is this minor? And then here, there are no anticipated permanent adverse physical impacts. So that's where I'm curious too right? And I think a lawyer could probably creatively argue that there are some adverse permanent physical impacts, and that the scope of the work may not be minor. So I don't know. And that's just where it's kind of left off. But I just wanted to bring it to for the record and for attention that perhaps. And I think perhaps DPW improperly authorized those, and who knows? I think with a different and one reason the mayor's race is so important is because that letter was written under the Byron Brown regime, and I think if you had a mayor that had a different policy, different procedures, they might actually advise the DPW commissioner to and it's all kind of what are the policies and procedures of City Hall. So a different regime may have ruled differently. So I think it just kind of illustrates a larger point of that this is a city issue, right? DPW is giving temporary easements to help with construction. So just the idea that NICEDOT and the FHA need temporary easements to do construction shows that this is a city issue. You have the DPW communicating with DOT. If it wasn't a city issue, then the DOT wouldn't be asking for permission. So, yeah. So I think maybe I'm leaving with more questions than answers, but something that I'd perhaps like to see investigated a little further is was that proper to grant that easement? So, but yeah, I just think it illustrates the larger point of how intertwined this project is and how it really is a city issue. Okay, so next I wanted to move on to essentially this item here. So this was proposed at last week's Common Council meeting. But is this item 25-379, construction of a new police training facility. So I was at a LOLA meeting, which is Liberation for One, Liberation from All, which is a group that it's pretty cool. They are trying to connect some of the global issues to the local level, and I think they've taken on this issue. So I attended their ones, but I want to bring this attention because essentially this is the city's finance, and they approved this on March 18th for the construction of a new police training facility. So, so what exactly is this? But essentially, the city's finance chair of the Common Council has proposed this bond, and this bond, it's a bond. So it's a bond resolution for the construction of a new police training facility. So, so essentially, I think this same as it. So essentially, this shooting facility, it's a shooting training facility in at 379 Podorevsky Drive. So where's Podorevsky Drive? So Podorevsky Drive is right by the central terminal. So if you kind of zoom out, this is a map of the Buffalo. You have the Buffalo Central Terminal right here, and this is the location of a new police training facility. And I think it's just this, right, just an illustration of the larger police culture that we're battling here in the city of Buffalo. Because I think, right, the Central Terminal is just another historic structure, right? That could be its own other show of the Central Terminal, but essentially this world-class train station that is starting to finally get some momentum to be built up as, right, the cultural economic gem that it is. And what is the city's, right, version of economic development, but locating a police training and shooting facility right next door, next to the terminal, but also just really in the heart of Broadway Fillmore. I mean, this is at literally the traffic circle at Memorial Drive. So I can show you here this facility, but I guess it was an old VFW post. But yeah, right here's a view of the Central Terminal with, right, it has a really nice park setup, but that's the Central Terminal there. That is a very historic structure. And then, yeah, here's the building that they're proposing to turn into a new police training facility. So again, right, there's the Central Terminal there. And then, yeah, this is the building that they're proposing turning into a training shooting facility for the police. Which I think, right, and even this bond. What is a bond? A bond is just saying, essentially the city's borrowing money. So the city's borrowing money, right? And I've covered this on some other shows, but the city is actually facing a massive financial deficit. No one really knows what it is, but essentially the city's running out of money. And while we don't, essentially they've been racking up credit card debt, and now they're asking to take out more money to build a shooting training facility, which is somewhat absurd because the city has already has a really high police budget. I think 21% of the city's police budget just goes to 21% of the city's budget goes just to the police department. And that's just active officers. It doesn't include retired officers that are collecting pensions. It doesn't include all the lawsuits that the police department has, but it's just, we're in this situation. The idea that the city's taking out this loan, or taking out a bond to, for for more police for a shooting training facility, and there's very little details. This has been not covered really by any media source, and it has not been pushed. Right, the Common Council member Nowakowski is not out there shouting into a microphone, "We're building a new training facility." They're really keeping this on the hush hush, and I think this sentence is too here. This says, "Whereas it has now been determined that it is in the best interest of the city to locate the new police training and shooting range facility at 379 Paderewski rather than Seneca Street as originally planned." So, essentially, from my understanding, this has been an ongoing construction project, and there's actually been a few other bond resolutions. The original plan was to build a shooting training facility on Seneca Street, and then now it just says it has been determined. I don't know how they determined it or who determined it, but yeah, it has been determined by someone that the best interest of the city is to locate a training facility, a police training facility near the central terminal, which I think is just, it's just, I don't know. I don't think the city needs more police shooting training facilities, especially, yeah. So I think one of the other things I wanted to dive in deep here is that this section 5, so it says this resolution shall be published in the city record and should not become effective until 30 days after adoption, subject to petition pursuant to Article 23-11 of the city charter. So what does that mean? So essentially, the city charter does. So what's section Article 23-11 of the city charter? So actually, if you go to this E Code 360, so this is the actual city charter. Where this is, this is the city charter, and essentially this says here that no resolution of the council creating a city debt to be evidenced by the issuance of bonds shall become effective until 30 days after its adoption. So if during that period a petition signed by registered electors of the city equal in number to at least 10% of the entire registered electorates in the city at the last preceding election is filed with the city clerk. So essentially what that's kind of saying is that the city charter does provide a way for residents of the city to oppose bond resolutions, and I mean, one reason why you want it, right? If you're issuing a bond, it means you don't have the money on hand. You're essentially issuing debt so that you can build this because you don't have the money. And I think this is just another example, especially with the city's charter review commission, which is essentially the city. Right, the city's looking into ways you could redo the charter, and I think this is just a perfect example of, right, 10% of the electorate of the city is a massive number. I think there's something like 200,000 registered voters in the city. So essentially, if the citizens wanted to oppose this bond, they would need to gather, in 30 days, a petition with 20,000 signatures on it, which is an absolutely massive lift. Just to give kind of context to the number of 20,000 signatures, right now, we're in a mayor's race, and candidates of the Democratic Party are petitioning, and they need to gather 2,000 signatures, which is their threshold is 5% of just the registered Democrats within the city, or 2,000, whichever is less. So, yeah, you people running for mayor, and they only need to gather 2,000 signatures. So asking non-politicians to gather 20,000 signatures in 30 days is really, I guess it's right. It's not impossible, but given the constraints, it really is nearly impossible to gather 20,000 signatures in 30 days and then file it, right? Especially for something where it's a $5 million bond. That's a tough ask, because I think it's just an example of where the charter needs to be revised, because I think there needs to be a easier way for citizens to oppose potential bonds. And I think that's one aspect. So technically, because the bond resolution was proposed on March 18th, that means residents of the city have 30 days to petition it, which so yeah, we're in this holding pattern now where we would need 20,000 signatures to oppose the bond resolution for the construction of this new shooting facility. So, especially someone that's an opponent of constructing a new shooting facility, especially where it is, which is not in the heart of a residential neighborhood that is just starting now to turn a corner and go on the upswing. So I've been looking into and auditing to, okay, well, if petitioning is nearly impossible, how may we be able to shut down or delay this project, or at least gum it up so that they can't build it? And that's where I wanted to look into the actual bond resolution. So it says here that the appropriate environmental review has been undertaken pursuant to the New York State Environmental Quality Review Act, so SECRA, and a final determination has been made pursuant to SECRA with respect to the proposed police training shooting range facility to be located at 379 Paderewski. So that's where I have questions of an environmental review. I searched online and could not find any information about any environmental review or a negative declaration. And I think that's one way that we may be able to oppose this is not through petitioning. I think, gathering 20,000 signatures in 30 days is impossible. But one way is because actually later on in this section it says, section 6 of this bond resolution says that the validity of the bonds authorized by this resolution or any bond anticipation notes issued in anticipation of the sale of said bonds may be contested. So it says they may be contested only if A, such obligations are authorized for an object or purpose for which the city of Buffalo is not authorized to expend money. So essentially, if the city wasn't allowed to issue bonds for this construction, which I think they are, because essentially it is a city facility. But B, it says the provisions of law which should be complied with at the date of the publication of this resolution are not substantially complied with, and an action, suit, or proceeding contesting such validity is commenced within 20 days after the date of such publication. So that's where I think there might be an avenue to potentially gum this up or stop the project down. Would be so it says right the provisions of law which should be complied with at the date of the publication. So if we can bring an action, suit, or proceeding contesting the validity because the provisions of law have not been complied with, that's where I'm curious and interested in is, if we could get them on SECRA, so SECRA, which is the New York State Environmental Quality Review Act, if we could find or bring forward a suit or an action saying that, hey, you did not comply with SECRA, that's a potential to gum it up and to actually stop the project from happening. And I think that's more likely, right? But that involves lawyers, that involves the legal process. But I think that to me at this point seems to have more potential than going door to door, gathering 20,000 signatures in 30 days, and then petitioning the city clerk. And even then, if we did that, it would go up to a vote amongst city residents. So that's where I don't know, because I'm not a SECRA lawyer, but if you are a SECRA lawyer, please send me a DM because I'm interested in talking with you. And I know just one issue. I think it's Chapter 641 of the Rules of New York, which is an environmental law. It says that if you do an environmental review, it needs to be posted on a publicly accessible web page. And that's just from my research, just looking at the Office of Strategic Planning, the Environmental Division, and OSP, you cannot find any information anywhere about any sort of environmental review. So I'm interested, did any environmental review happen? Especially, it looks like this proposed facility had been proposed in Seneca Street. So when they switched it to the Paderewski Drive, was an environmental review ever conducted? That would be the first thing. And then one, it's not publicly available online. But then even if it was conducted, did they do the actual environmental review properly? And that's where, if it's not online, there's no way for me or for us to verify that they did do it properly. And I think this is just kind of the other reason I think this might be an opportunity to slow down is just with the Kensington Expressway project being an example of a state agency or city kind of having this project they want to do, pushing it through and cutting corners on the environmental review. Now that I've maybe been around the block a little bit, I'm starting to see that, right, environmental law in New York is, right, it's there to protect the environment, but it also potentially might be a way for community groups to oppose projects that they don't like. Because if the city and the state and the county and whatnot are regularly violating environmental law, maybe just us suing them because they didn't follow that environmental law is a way of actually slowing down construction projects that we don't want to see. So that's where I don't know. I like help. I think we'd like your help too. To anyone that has any, no, but I think that's our best avenue towards slowing this shooting project down is actually doing some deep dive auditing into the environmental review of this proposed facility. One, did they conduct an environmental review? And if so, did they do that environmental review properly? And if they didn't, then we can bring forward, right, an action, suit, or proceeding that contests the validity because the provisions of law that should be complied with were not substantially complied with. And I think that's the best avenue for us now to propose it, because we're in this time period, right? It's March 18th. So 30 days for petitioning, which would be the April 18th. That's where, based on this law, I don't know. So it says, is the action, suit, or proceeding needs to be commenced within 20 days after the date of such publication. So I believe once the 30-day petition window ends and the city publishes in the city record, which is the Buffalo News, that this bond resolution passed, then I believe we have a 20-day window to bring forward an action, suit, or proceeding. So a lot of work to be done, but I think it is, and I'm interested in maybe pursuing that. Because I know me personally, I've been a tenant in that neighborhood. I've spent a significant amount of time in that neighborhood. I do consider it like a home to me, and I do not want to see a new shooting range for the police in the heart of Broadway, Fillmore, in the heart of the East Side. It doesn't belong in a residential neighborhood. It does not belong in that neighborhood. And I think given that the threshold to petition the bond is so high, right, with 20,000 signatures, and I know I have filed a Freedom of Information Law request with the Office of Strategic Planning, asking for documents sufficient to show that that the State Environmental Quality Review Act was followed, and requesting other secret documents in regards to the new proposed police shooting training facility at 379 Podorevsky. So we'll see what OSP, if they respond and how they respond, because I'm interested in seeing, right, did they follow the actual environmental law? And if not, can we bring forward a suit, action, or proceeding contesting the validity of, their following of the law? So stay tuned, but that's kind of, something we'll see. That's an ever moving target. So it's okay. We got about 15 minutes here. So I wanted to, we've covered tomorrow's big ESP item in the council. Then we audited a little bit about the actual correspondence and kind of debunked how the Kensington actually technically is a city issue. That was the training facility, and that was opposed at the last meeting. So now I wanted to look through some of the agenda minutes. So I think right off the bat, one of the interesting things that I saw is actually tomorrow's civil service meeting. So, right, I filed some items with some of my concerns that the city of Buffalo is systemically violating civil service law, its own classified rules of civil service. And I was actually fortunate enough to be welcomed into the chambers by the Honorable Committee Chair Rashid Wyatt, and was able to speak about some of my concerns, essentially that the city is systemically violating Rule 16.4 of civil service around provisional employments. So based on my perceptions and my understanding, I mean, this is what happened to me, is the city is using provisional employment, which is a type of temporary employment that's only supposed to last 9 months. And they're appointing people to provisional appointments and keeping them provisional for more than 9 months. In my case, it was indefinitely. And you might ask, well, why would they do that? So essentially, the provisional class is just really meant to be there to temporarily fill a job before a civil service exam can be held. And we hold civil service exams because they help, right? They help provide kind of a neutral way of hiring civil servants and public employees through kind of a competency-based hiring practice, right? If we hold an exam that anybody can take, it kind of helps take some of the political aspects around of City Hall workers. And another reason, my perception of why they do that is because actually, according to the city's collective bargaining agreement with the white collar union, local AFS CME 650, provisional employees are not entitled to termination proceedings, and they do not have the full rights as stated in the Bill of Rights of the collective bargaining agreement. So my perception is that the prior regime was appointing people and keeping people provisional because it, one, made them easier to fire and it stripped them of their rights, which I think has created the culture in City Hall of corruption, right? I think, right, there are good people in City Hall, but I think we all kind of know that it is a clown car of crooks and cowards. And in my case, I think, in a way, how is this all perpetuated? It's kind of perpetuated through the local AFS CME 650 president, Tracy Healy. So Tracy Healy is the president of the white collar union. So she's responsible for representing all the members of local 650, which in my case, I was a member of 650. So she was responsible for representing me, and she didn't do that and refused to represent me because while she's also the president of the union, she is also a personnel specialist one in the civil service department. So she's actually, her job as a city worker is to offer civil service exams. So she's kind of playing both sides of the fence. And yeah, there's some I have other concerns I could ramble on here. I've done some deep dives into that, but essentially, I have concerns because they're systemically violating the law, and I've kind of articulated that. And yeah, I was very excited because it looks like Councilmember Wyatt in 25-522, he actually filed a resolution requesting a report on grievances, hiring, and terminations. And I'm excited because after I spoke in the chambers, I think it was said that and Pedro Gonzalez Ortiz, who's now the chief of staff of the council, he came up to me in the chambers and said that they were on vacation or they were going to be there the next meeting, but they couldn't make it there. And here we are a couple of months later, and nobody's been in the chambers. But I'm excited because the civil service chair Rashid Wyatt, he filed this resolution. So he's actually requesting that representatives from the Department of Human Resources and Civil Service attend the next Civil Service Committee meeting and provide a comprehensive explanation of the grievance process, including the steps taken to address and investigate such grievances. And this is exciting because, right, part of the reason that Tracy Healy, being both the union president of Local 650 and a worker in the Civil Service division of the Department of Human Resources, is actually the CBA stipulates the grievance process. So, right, if any City Hall worker has a grievance, there's an actual laid out process to do that, and actually requires interactions between the union, so the union and the HR commissioner. So essentially, because Tracy Healy, right, she's the president of the union, so she's actually on the grievance committee for every department. So she's responsible for representing any City Hall worker in a grievance. And during the grievance process, she then needs to kind of, prosecute or build a case and go against the human resources commissioner. So essentially, because she's both the union president and a worker in the HR department, this gives essentially the commissioner of human resources direct supervision over the president of the union, which I believe creates a conflict of interest. And I believe that's part of the reason of why I was fired, of me bringing up a grievance. One, it forced Tracy Healy, because I was filing a grievance and was concerned that no civil service exam was offered for my civil service position. It required Tracy Healy, the union president, to investigate and prosecute Tracy Healy, the civil service worker. So it creates a conflict of interest there, but then also it creates a situation where Tracy Healy is then needed to investigate and essentially prosecute the Human Resources Commissioner, who is their boss, which obviously is another um, conflict of interest there. And if that wasn't all bad enough, I also believe that the city of Buffalo is deducting wages from provisional employees without their permission, because the CBA requires that all city hall workers have an authorization form. So essentially, they need to authorize the city to deduct dues from their paychecks, which I did not sign, and I have evidence through FOIL requests that there's at least 2 other city hall workers, and I've filed multiple FOIL requests seeking more information of all of the city hall workers' due authorization forms, which have not been responded to. And I believe that's an issue because, one, provisional employees might actually exercise that right to not have their dues deducted if they were aware that their provisional status did not give them full rights under the collective bargaining agreement. So yeah, that's kind of my backstory and a little context to that end, but I'm really excited because as someone that follows the council, the Civil Service Commission or committee is concerning because they only schedule 15-minute meetings. So they only schedule every 2 weeks 15 minutes of time to talk about civil service in the city, which, right, civil service obviously is extremely dry and boring, right? So municipal civil service is not, it's right, there's a reason it's not filling, football stadiums. It's really boring and dry, but it's really important because personnel services are like the largest expense of the city, right? The largest expense of the city is not, it's not tar to fill potholes. It's not, right, trees to plant in the ground. It is literally services. It's personnel services. So if there's corruption and corrosion in the civil service division of the city, and personnel services are the largest expense of the city, right, it essentially creates a situation where there is corruption and corrosion everywhere because the largest expense is, one, getting no oversight. And I'm excited. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm really excited and honestly, I'm very, I don't know if proud's the right word, but I really respect Councilmember Wyatt for taking this issue seriously, and I'm very, very interested in seeing where that conversation goes because I feel, and we're approaching now 2 years since I've been fired, and I've worked through a lot of the trauma of my own termination because, right, if your union president stabs you in the back, it causes some trauma, some employment trauma, and even now when I am gainfully employed, I still deal with the trauma of I always think am I gonna get fired? And even now, working a job, my boss can say, "No, Matt, you're doing great. We're not going to fire you." Right? I can hear that and I can trust that, but all at the same time, I can't unlearn what I've learned. If my union president, who told me that she had my back, my union president fired me, that means that anybody can fire me. And I really, it's not something you unlearn. I've worked through it, and I've tried my best to talk about it, to make waves, to get some reform, and it's all fell on deaf ears. So it feels really good to have a council member take a serious stand on civil service because while it is dry and boring and doesn't get clicks, it's really important because the city of Buffalo is facing a fiscal crisis and the largest expense is personnel services. So we need to really bring integrity into civil service and to the personnel services of the city because we can no longer afford the alternative, which is the corrosion that I think these kind of systemic design things have come in. So that's, I think, to me personally, and obviously I'm a little biased just based on my experience, and but I think that's the most important item on the agenda. And I'd be curious to see where item 25-522 comes in. So let's turn to a lighter subject, but I wanted to talk about the blues. So the blues, what's the blues? It's really an American art form. It's a form of music that is maybe not as popular now, although I think you can find a lot of the influence of the blues really embedded in all forms of American music. So I think a lot of pop music, rock music has the blues or blues influence embedded in it. And while the blues may not be a radio kind of genre today, and I think obviously it still exists in its pure forms in certain pockets, but really I think the blues is something that is embedded throughout all of American music. So I wanted to spend some time talking about the 12-bar blues. So what are the 12-bar blues? So the 12-bar blues, and one of the things I want to maybe start talking on future shows is actually auditing music and some of the mathematics behind music, because ultimately a lot of music is math and vice versa. But I want to talk about the 12-bar blues because I think this is like a good place to start to understanding math and music and also math and the blues. But essentially, yeah, this is the 12-bar blues. So this is maybe the most basic form of the blues, but essentially the 12-bar blues, what is the 12-bar blues? So essentially a bar is essentially just a measure of music. So if you think of a song, it's just different notes, but essentially the 12-bar blues is just this essentially pattern of 12 bars that repeats. So essentially starts as kind of a one, or like, so this is in the key of C. So C, 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 F, F, C, C, G, F, C, C, and then it will loop around to the beginning. So that's kind of the blue bars. It's just essentially a pattern of 12 bars and 12 chords in an order. And this is pretty standard of essentially the way the 12 bars works, at least in regards to chords, is there's 4 bars of the one, which in this case in the C. So 4 bars of a C chord, and then 2 chords of the 4, which is in this case is the F, 2 chords of C, and then a 5 chord, which is G, 4, which is F, and then 2 more C's. That's one example, but this is kind of a variation of essentially blues really just works with 3 chords, which is 1 chord, which is essentially like the root or the main music, and then really, if you can think of Western music, there's really the 1 and 5 is kind of the standard of it. Of the 1 is the root, the 5 is the dominant note of a chord, and yeah, the blues just kind of has this basic pattern. I think so. That's kind of the music or the chord structure behind blues music, but it also kind of correlates with the actual like vocal pattern or the actual lyrical pattern. So a lot of the time, the blues will start with a statement, repeat that statement, and then have some sort of refrain at the end. So that's kind of the overlay to the 12-bar blues is actually you say something, then you say something again, and then you have a refrain or kind of a response to that. And it's kind of this way of, because you repeat a statement twice, you kind of build this anticipation. And a lot of times, a lot of blues music will have the third refrain be kind of some sort of contradiction, some sort of humorous note, or kind of twist or unexpectedly say something that you maybe weren't expecting. And really, that's kind of the basis of the blues music. And obviously, there's a lot more than that, but essentially, if you have the 12-bar blue pattern, and then you have a vocal pattern where you say something, and then you say something different. If you have those two elements, you essentially have the fundamentals of the blues down. And obviously, right, you have master blues musicians that spend a whole lifetime just weaving that out, right? Because there's all sorts of variations of the 12-bar progression. It's not as simple as 1 1 1 1 4 4 1 1 5 4 5 1. There's all sorts of intricate patterns, but it never deviates from 12 bars. Although there's 16-bar blues, but really, at the fundamental is just that 12-bar scheme with the rhyme scheme, and essentially you can go on indefinitely. So, I think one thing I think I'm interested in pursuing more is more kind of musicality, because I know Uncle John and I, and we'll be recording next week on Tuesday, but we're doing an art in AI event, and I think I'm going to try to do an infringement this year and do an actual musical performance, because it's been a while, but I think I'm ready to do a musical performance at infringement. And the blues has been inspirational to maybe my own personal musicality and my own personal style, which I'll be re-unveiling in the summer. But yeah, it's a very American concept, and it really it's embedded in ways that we don't fully understand throughout American music. A lot of the pop music is really based on, right, 1-4-5, which takes its roots from the blues, but a lot of the concepts there have embedded, because obviously Americana music is this kind of smorgasbord of different genres that have all cross-pollinated. So that's a little bit about the blues, and thank you for tuning in. So yeah, that's another episode of Austin Audits, and next week I'll be on Tuesday recording with Uncle John, and yeah, thanks for tuning in, and yeah, Phil and Humboldt Highway.